Hey, you know what's not fun? I want to get this right out of the way. Is the recent Unity news. My notes just say Unity shitness. So this was a story that has really, really enraptured me because for as long as I can remember, Unity has been the bastion, or maybe bastion's a little dramatic, but it's been one of the main kind of like leading names when it comes to, hey, any person can make a video game. You can go download Unity for free, learn all the coding stuff. They have a whole library of assets and things like that, and there's like guides for how to program games. Like Unity, I mean, I messed around with Unity when I was younger. And they have somehow managed to make the most, how would I describe it? The most kamikaze business decision I could ever imagine. So you might have heard about this, you might have not. You might not know what's going on with it. I've seen a few people who don't really get the whole thing, because this is a very game dev centered thing. So if you're not super tuned into like game dev talk stuff, you might have not really entirely caught this. So Unity, the game engine, which is famous for having its own just kind of like free private use version that anyone can download to mess around with. An extremely flexible engine that can do a lot of things. So it's kind of like, I don't know, it's a very, very powerful things can be made with Unity. It's not great for absolutely everything, but a lot of great games are made in Unity because it's so accessible to people. Well, they announced a couple days ago, earlier this week, and I was so glad that this happened after the last podcast went up, because there's been a lot of time for this story to develop, because they announced that they would be changing their terms of service. They would be adding, I believe starting next year, a fee to any game, a potential fee, I should say, to any game built in Unity, based off of how many installs the game gets. So previously, before, Unity prided itself on being a zero royalty service. There is a professional package, which there's a variety of different pricing models for it, but that's just like a I believe yearly subscription that you pay to Unity to use it professionally, which is like a fair, pretty decent, honest business model. Well, no, this new fee plan would introduce so basically Unity would charge a developer up to 20 cents per download if they exceeded a certain volume of downloads, which is kind of fucking crazy. Because mind you, it's like it's the most insane thing that you could come up with, because it's so close to being kind of reasonable, right? If it was a certain amount per purchase, that would make sense. And they might even do that. I'm pretty sure there might even be like actually no, they said no royalties. But if they wanted to say a certain amount per purchase, wouldn't be awesome, but it would still make sense, right? That's still like a business decision that makes sense. It's a little scummy to spring it on someone, but it makes sense. Per install? Hold up. So, you're telling me that I can buy a game one time, install it, they get charged, uninstall it, reinstall it, they get charged, uninstall it, reinstall it, they get charged. Are you telling me that with enough gumption, I can single-handedly bankrupt a developer by buying their game? the most nonsensical, to the point where, you know, there's that thing, the what is it? Is it Poe's law? No, that's not Poe's law. Hanlon's razor. Never attribute to malice what could just as easily be explained with incompetence, right? So that's oftentimes my first instinct is, okay, maybe they're just really stupid. This is so stupid that, number one, it's so stupid that it feels, it's hard to believe that you could make a decision this bad. And it's hard to believe that a company as big as Unity could have what I imagine is so many people on its payroll. Like, you realize that companies hire people to prevent stuff like this from happening. Like, they hire, I have to mute a fucking Discord server right now. They hire people to advise them on things that may or may not make sense. For instance, if we introduce out of nowhere a fee for our developers that makes absolutely no sense, is that going to alienate 90% of our clients? Yes, maybe we shouldn't do it then. And now, their defense of this is that this would only affect 10% of their user base, that being developers, right? People making games. That is cherry-picked at best and very misleading at worst, because 10%, let's take it in face value and say that that's actually true, that only 10% of users would be affected by it, which I can actually believe because it said it's over a certain threshold. They didn't say what threshold it was because they have reserved the right to be completely opaque about this. So developers, that 10% of develop, so it's kind of like when YouTube said that they were removing community annotations, or sorry, just annotations in general, because, quote, only like 5 or 10% of the YouTube user base even use those features. And it was like, yes, YouTube, because only 10% of the user base actually makes videos. And only a certain amount of people who make videos are going to be using annotations. It's an extremely useful feature for the people who do use it, who create the bulk of value on the site, you know, the users who actually make videos. But you can look at data and say that most people aren't using it, so it's like some luxury sports car manufacturer saying that they're going to stop making cars because most people don't buy them. Yeah, that's the point. The point is that most people don't buy them. In any event, that's what this statement is an echo of. And even having said that, it's actually even more stupid. It makes even less sense because, mind you, we're talking about video games. I've said this before, video games are one of the only industries, entertainment industries, where it is actually very common for small indie productions to become as big, if not bigger, as big budget AAA titles. We are in a very interesting industry where that's something that happens kind of regularly. You know, not out of the question. And in cases like that, the barrier or the line between personal use and professional use can get a little blurry. Trust me, as someone who's downloaded Adobe Premiere presets that say personal use only for videos that I make for my job, the line can get blurry really fast, guys. Ooh, I'm such a devious little bad boy. I downloaded sound effects meant for personal use and made it used it in a video that I can indirectly make money from Patreon. Ooh, it's like a legal gray area. Ooh, yum, yum, yummy, nummy. A case in point for a why this idea that, well, it's only going to be affecting really successful developers, why that doesn't really make a lot of sense. A game that, if you're a regular listener of this podcast, you've absolutely heard me go on and on and on about. You're very familiar with me talking about, at the very least. Vampire Survivors. Vampire Survivors was a game made by an Italian gentleman named Ponsel. It's either Ponsel or Poncol, or maybe Poncle. But Ponsel always made sense to me in my head. Who basically just made this game in his spare time as a hobby. Invested about $1,000 of his money into it, which is, it's a hobby thing. It's reasonable to invest some money into a hobby, especially if you're really enjoying it and whatever. So he invested about $1,000 into it, and he decided to throw it up on Steam for $3 per purchase. Just a flat $3 fee, price tag. And with the idea being that, well, maybe in a few years it'll eventually pay itself off. I'll make the money back that I spent on it, and maybe a little more, and I'll have this little thing from sales of my this little game that I made. Well, a lot more happened than that. It made its money back, plus some. It became one of the biggest games on Steam, on Twitch, on YouTube for a little while, at least a couple weeks, and has had a continued success. Every single DLC they put out, it's getting a fucking cartoon, like an animated series about it. With, I think, one of the guys from John Wick, successful beyond his wildest dreams, like this tiny humble little game that was inspired by a mobile game that he thought was neat, that he assumed no one would play. Oh, now it's his job. He quit his job to go work on Vampire Survivors. That is the kind of developer that this fee change would hurt, could easily stunt the growth of. Saying that it only affects a small minority of very successful developers is kind of a misnomer, and I don't think it's a great argument. This story gets a little more, how do I say, a little more complicated, because the backlash to this decision was huge, and it was immediate. There were a number of developers, indie and small scale devs who had a lot to say about it. A lot of cyberpunk text on colored background, public statements. You had there were like honestly too many to count. There was the Cult of the Lamb people. There was the people. There was a lot of people. With developers of games that you have heard of, openly decrying this, and with some of them threatening to potentially delist their games. You can rest assured that any future projects they made will not be using Unity, even if this change gets pulled back, right? And that's the thing. Even if this gets completely rolled back and the whole idea gets scrapped, no one is going to use Unity after this. Maybe some people will, who don't know, but there's going to be a permanent, huge stain, at least I'd hope so, because they deserve it for this, on their reputation. And if you are looking to get into game development, I would just personally highly caution you against using Unity. Their CEO is a man by the name of John Riccatello. Who is it racist to say that sounds like a mafioso name? Who was formerly at Electronic Arts as their CEO until 2004. Let's see. Oh, great. He has a section on his Wikipedia page called litigation. On June 5th, 2019, Ann Evans, former vice president in human resources for Unity Technologies, recent, filed a sexual harassment and wrongful termination lawsuit against the company, stating that Riccatello sexually harassed her. All right. In September, the Superior Court of California issued a court order granting Unity's motion to compel arbitration and stay all proceedings. Oh, they just muscled her out. So John Riccatello, a former EA guy, 2004 EA guy. Ooh, that was like the slip. From 97 to 2004, that was the slip. Apparently once suggested that when Battlefield 3 was coming out, that they should charge players to reload their guns, because if you hook them in with the game, what they won't mind paying extra for doing a task as trivial as reloading their gun, which was like, that wasn't a joke. You can look this up. That was a real thing he said. That's the kind of guy running Unity. So actually, this isn't surprising at all. To further complicate things, after this huge controversy, why does nobody know the year he was born? Why does Wikipedia say 1957 or 1958? Was he a mystery? Was he a mystery man? What? Anyway, there was going to be some kind of Unity, I think they were going to call it a town hall meeting, which ended up getting canceled and their offices closed down because of a, quote, credible death threat. So you read that and you're like, oh boy, death threat's not good, but does it surprise me? No. And you know what's even weirder? It turns out, and this is known because of police involvement in the death threat. It came from a Unity employee, which is kind of bizarre. I would sort of expect it to be someone who was more affected by the change, like a developer or something. But I guess this was it even related? Was it someone who was it somebody who was just really peeved that their company was destroying itself with this horrible business decision? I don't know, but it is a weird wrinkle to the story. Over the last day or two, the situation has slightly calmed down, and I think we're going to be waiting on some more news. Now, what I hope this is not is I hope that this isn't I'm not sure if there's a good allegory for this kind of a thing, but it's a thing that people will do where they suggest something real, haggling. Let's call it haggling. They'll suggest something kind of outrageous, right? Like this stupid fee. And then when that gets pushed back, when that gets a bunch of backlash, which they anticipated it getting, they back down from it. Everyone says, okay, the day is saved. And then they introduce the thing that they actually wanted, which is still bad, but not as insane. And then the needle gets pushed a little further because everyone has the comparison point. Well, it's not as bad as when they tried to do that other thing. And I hope against hope that this is not one of those situations. I hope nothing bad happens, because I think that having something like Unity is really good for a lot of people. And I feel genuinely really bad for developers who are too deep into developing a game on Unity, who have sunk a lot of time and effort into it, that now they have to be scared of their own success. One of the most baffling light yourself on fire decisions I could imagine. Also, apparently, I think he sold like 3,000 shares a couple days before the announcement went up. So there's that. There's that. I wonder if he's going to jump ship from the company soon. You want to take bets on that? You want to take bets that he's going to jump ship? I don't know what I'd bet. But, yeah. That's my thoughts. Just, oh man, such a stressful situation to be in if you're affected by that. My heart goes out to people who have put a lot of time and effort into this, into something that they care about, for this to get dropped on them. It really sucks. And I guess it's, is it another reason to promote open source software? That would be nice. That's a nice thing about FOSS.